Yeah, that song is it's such a beautiful song, like to listen to. Um, but like if you listen to the words, it's painful, isn't it? Like you know that like Paul Simon, the author of the song, and you get the sense that it's like autobiographical. Like you just get the sense that he writes this from like from this place of deep pain. Um, Now you know truth exists like in these lyrics. Like this is a song about a man who has observed in his life that many people just have difficulties communicating with each other. You know, he sees. You can tell in the song that he sees communication is very superficial. And here's what I would say. I would say that, like in our lives today, like serious understanding does not exist in many cases because serious communication is not happening. You know, so like listen to what he says. He says that people are talking without speaking. They're hearing, like without listening. You know, it's like this superficial communication. Like he talks about like vulnerability in the song. Now vulnerability is going to be an antidote to you know, loneliness. And what he says is no one dares like risk reaching out. Like take my arms. He's actually like crying out in the song almost like, you know, take my arms so that I might reach you. Now even he would recognize that his own attempts. So think about this. Like here's probably one of the most well-known songwriters of you know, the 20th century. And what he says is his own attempts at communication are futile. He says, but my words are like silent raindrops, you know, falling within the wells of silence. So, do you ever feel this way? Like, you just can't quite communicate what you want to communicate, like, with who you want to communicate with the most? You know, maybe it's just like trust or vulnerability on your side. Maybe it's something like defensiveness or distraction on the other side, but you just can't quite get there. Like that's where he is. Or like, do you ever wish that someone would share their feelings with you a whole lot better than what they currently are? Like, you know, they would just tell you what's going on in that mind of theirs. You know, they would just share with you what's going on in that heart of theirs, and you would be able to hear that in a way that is really meaningful. Now, I would say that like many of us do feel this way. I've done a lot of research on loneliness this week, and basically, it's 40% of people over the age of 65 would report that they're lonely a significant amount of time. You know, for those of us who are a little bit younger, we're basically looking between 25% and 1/3 of us would say that, yeah, we're lonely at least some of the time. It's interesting, like for adolescents, like, you know, teenagers, they would actually be back up there like where the retirees would be. They would say that they're lonely higher than you know, the general adult population. Now, this is normal. I mean, loneliness is normal, but loneliness is not good. Like, this is not the way that God has created us to live. Now, I would say this, like, we need a few people. Like, I need a few people in my life to be my friend. I really need that. Like, I don't need a ton of them. Like, I checked this out this morning. I was curious. So on Facebook, I have 1,996 friends. I don't have 1,996 friends. I'm affiliated with that many people on a social media site. If I look at my life, I probably have about 2 or 3 friends that you know, these are my people. You know, I need these people. You need these people as well. We are not created to live this life alone. So think about Mother Teresa. Like this woman was a servant in Calcutta, India. You know, one of the largest, one of the poorest cities in the whole world. Now this woman's seen everything. Like she's seen murder, she's seen abuse, she's seen poverty, she's seen kids starve to death. I mean, she's seen it all. Now, in her biography, like, listen to what she wrote. She says that loneliness is the most terrible form of poverty. Of all the things that this woman saw, you know, in her long life, the thing that she said was the worst was loneliness. It's the most brutal form of poverty. Now, have you ever so you felt this? Well, you had to have felt this way at least some of the time. I mean, I don't think you can be alive today in 2015 and at least experienced this, a few times in our life. Now, what's really interesting is in the Bible, the verse that Jennifer read a little bit ago, this isn't going to be like the most uplifting verse that we're going to read all year. But what's really interesting is like King David is one who wrote, it's actually a song. He would have sung this to God. It's, we call it a psalm. So think about David. I mean, we talked about him a little bit a couple weeks ago. Like, okay, so here's like the leader of Jerusalem, military general, city planner, giant killer, shepherd. He's handsome, he's rugged, he's rich, he's popular. But I'm going to read you just the first 3 verses of what Jennifer read a little bit ago. And like, I'm going to tell you this, if this can happen to David, this can happen to you. If this can happen to David, a man after God's own heart, this can happen to me. There's none of us that are going to be immune from this poverty of loneliness in our life. It can happen. So listen to what David writes, and just think, like, David is actually like singing this to God. He's not writing this, and this is between him and God. And he says, turn to me and have mercy. So David is calling out for more of God's presence in his life. And like, listen to what he says next. For I am alone and in deep distress. Now, what's really interesting here is David becomes vulnerable with God. And for us to get past the loneliness that we're experiencing in this world, vulnerability simply has to happen. We can't leave our mask on and pretend that we're something that we're not. We have to be real. David starts with God, and that's where I recommend that we start as well. Turn to me and have mercy, for I am alone and in deep distress. My problems go from bad to worse. Some of us have felt that way probably even this week. Oh, save me from all of them. Feel my pain. I mean, he's asking God, like, God, take this journey with me. I'm tired of doing this alone. Come alongside me. Feel my pain and see my trouble and forgive all my sins. Now, I want to clear like 2 things up before we really dig into this. Thing number 1 is that a crowd is not necessarily company. Okay, so you got that? A crowd is not necessarily company. Loneliness and physically being alone are 2 different things altogether. Now, you can be sitting next to the person that you love the most, and you can be totally alone right now. You can be by yourself, and you can totally feel comfortable with who you are and the love of other people and the love of God. This is just the way it works out. Like, I have a neighbor. Hope he's not here today. He goes to some Lutheran church in Gretna usually. But so I have this next door neighbor. I'll call him Fred, although his real name's Patrick. And now, he's a nice guy. Like, we've actually lived next door to each other for 8 years. Now, there's some things that I know about him. I know he's a pharmacist. I know he works some really strange hours. I know he has 3 kids, about the age of my 2 kids. I know he loves youth sports. I know he's a great guy. I know his dog really well. I take the dog outside sometimes when they're gone and feed the dog and all that kind of stuff. So this means that, like, we live next door to each other. His garage and my garage are about 20 feet apart. Like, when I scoop my walk, I always do a little bit more for him, and when he mows the yard, he always does a little bit more for me. And but I want to tell you what I don't know about him, okay? I don't know his hopes. He's never told me about the man that he hopes that he's becoming. He's never talked to me about that. I don't know his fears. I don't know the thing that just scares him most in this world. I don't know the collective stories that have shaped the person that he is today. I mean, he follows me on Twitter. I mean, he's got to be a great guy. But think about it. Like, here's where I want to go with this. Like, you can be like in your kitchen, okay, at a table with 5 other people, sharing a nice meal together, and you can be totally alone. You can be at Panera by yourself over lunch, and you can totally be content with who you are, and how you relate to other people and how you relate to God. You can be laying in bed with someone in close proximity to you, and in those inches can seem like miles. You can be walking around the lake on a trail by yourself, and again, feel no feelings of being alone. I believe that the cruelest form of loneliness is when it is felt in close proximity with a loved one who we are no longer communicating with. Okay, so I want to clear something else up as well. Loneliness and solitude are going to be two different things. Loneliness and solitude are two. Now, I talk to you guys about solitude all the time. In fact, if you guys have been around here for more than a few years, you could come up and give you the speech that I'm about to give right now. I recommend solitude. I think solitude is a great thing. Usually at the first part of every year, and it was just a couple months ago, where I would have said something like, you know what, you need to do it, and this isn't actually my idea, it's Jesus' idea. He says, when you go into the closet, what do? You shut the door. You go into solitude for a little bit, you pray. What I say at a lot is 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, whatever it is. Pray, just turn off everything, find a quiet place, go into that solitude where you can hear God, where you can speak to God, where you can be vulnerable with God, where you can read God's word, where you can experience God's grace. That solitude, you're alone when it happens, but just because you're in solitude doesn't mean that you're lonely. Loneliness is a psychological state. It's not like a physical state. It's not where we are. It's who we are up here. So loneliness is always going to be painful. It's always going to be a negative experience, where solitude, intentional solitude, is going to be a very positive state. Now, in loneliness, it doesn't matter if you're by yourself or if you're with others. Loneliness is the feelings of intense rejection and inadequacy. So think about this. When you've experienced loneliness, you've probably felt pretty inadequate. You probably, felt some rejection. What solitude is going to do, on the other hand, is it's going to allow us to get in touch with our true self. It's going to allow us to reflect upon our past and our life and our future and help us emerge as stronger and better. Now, the last thing is that loneliness is going to deplete us. If you're lonely for long, extended periods of time, it's just going to hurt. There's just no way. Eventually, something like depression is going to happen. There's no way that it can't. We're not created to be lonely people. We're created to live in community with others and community with God. Now, solitude, on the other hand, is going to restore us and refresh us, so that when we emerge from the solitude, that we're more balanced and centered and focused and equipped and inspired and well-adjusted. Now, I believe this is true. I believe that the quality of our solitude is going to have a high correlation to the quality of our relationships. Where we close the door and we go and we be with God and God speaks to us. And I believe that when we're rested, we can give our best to other people. I believe that when we have experienced God's grace, that we can give that same grace to others. I believe that when we experience peace during the solitude, that we can go and share this peace with a very anxious world. So, this is interesting. As you read through the Bible, the first thing that God recognized as bad, what do you think it was? I'll give you a hint. I'm talking about it today. So it's going to be loneliness. You don't have to go very far. You just have to go into the second chapter of Genesis, verse 18. So at this time, Adam was by himself. Now, God saw that Adam was lonely. He tried to give him some animals. That didn't work out. So what God said is, then the Lord God said in chapter 2, verse 18, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper who is just right for him." So think about your life, okay? How did it begin? Well, it began when your mom gave birth to you. Now, could you have survived the first 5 years without somebody? Absolutely not. You probably wouldn't have made it more than a few days. In the beginning of our life, this community with other people was absolutely essential. You couldn't have survived without it. Now, let's look at the end of your life for the most part. There's going to be some exceptions, but I've experienced this with a few of my grandparents. When my grandpa Adolph passed away and when my grandma Fern died, they both had about a 6 to a 12-month time of deterioration where they were no longer able to take care of themselves. I was living about 30 miles away as a pastor in a church in the town where they lived, and there was many times that me and my mom and my dad and some others, we took trips to the pharmacy, and we went to the doctor, and we went to the hospital, and we went to the nursing home. Because there becomes a time where we're no longer able to take care of ourselves. Now just think, like if life begins this way and life ends this way, do you think it's meant that all this time in between is going to be any different? Absolutely not. We need each other. Now survival is going to be based upon our collectivism. You wouldn't have survived those first few years unless there was some collectivism in your life. You wouldn't, or we're not going to survive, those last few years without some collectivism in our life. Now, Paul, he knows this, and he would say that survival isn't just based upon collectivism. It's all this part in the middle, like abundance. Like once you get past that stage where you don't physically need your parents, and before you get to that time where you physically need your kids or your grandkids, like Paul's saying, for all this time in the middle, abundance then is going to be based upon collectivism as well. So listen to what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 26 through 27. Now, I want you to listen to this. Like Paul's actually writing to the church in Corinth or in Greece here. So Paul is actually writing to the church members, and he's saying this is your responsibility. He says not only is this your responsibility, this is your opportunity. So listen to what he says. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. And if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. So here's this encouragement. All of you together are Christ's body. This is applying to us. And each of you is a part of this body. So here's what I wrote this week when I read this verse. I believe that life's challenges are divided when they are shared. And I believe that life's celebrations are multiplied when they are shared. It's like here, you get the best of both worlds. If you got a tribe, if you got some people, what's going to happen is when you go through those really, really tough times, you got some people to divide your pain. You don't have to do this all by yourself. And then the really cool part is when there's some triumphs, when there's some achievements, when there's some successes, you don't have to celebrate alone, because celebrations are multiplied when they happen in the company of loved ones. So so this sermon, it's so different than I would have been able to preach 10 years ago. I'm talking about loneliness today, and if I were to give them this sermon in 2005, it would have taken a totally different turn. But the world took a totally different turn, around 2005 or so. Yeah, I remember, I think it was probably 2004, 2005, when I started sending and receiving these things known as text messages. I believe that this has totally, and I don't think it's necessarily good. I mean, some of it's very good, and some of it's not so good at all. But this is, if you don't believe me, well, let's just keep going. So Facebook, it just celebrated its 10th anniversary, but it wasn't available to most of the mainstream people until 7 or 8 years ago. Twitter wasn't a big thing until 5 years ago. So this has totally changed the way that people relate. If you don't believe me, so school here at Millard West gets out at 3:15, Monday through Friday. So if you don't believe me, just come and stand out there. Back in 2004, it would have been, hey, how's it going? How was your day? You want to come hang out? Hey, let's go talk to that guy over there. Everyone's looking at each other. We got this eye contact. We're relating like real people. That was 10 years ago. Here's how it's going to be now. Hey, want to hang? No, want to text. It's we have this virtual world, and this is not helping the case for loneliness here. It's just not. Even if you have FaceTime, when's the last time you've had one of these really, really, so Doug, I know you really well. Doug and I have known each other for probably 9 or 10 years almost. I don't know if I've texted Doug more than a few logistical things over the years, but there's been some times when he and I have had some really meaningful conversations. He's shared part of his story with me. I've shared part of my story with him. And that's not going to happen on email. It's not going to happen on Twitter. It's not going to happen on Facebook. Now, I'm not saying just totally delete your accounts and deactivate it and disengage from the world. I'm saying there is no substitute for face-to-face communication. If you're dealing with some loneliness, the best thing is just to look somebody in the eye and say, here's what I'm going through. I'm not this perfect person that everybody thinks that I am based on my profile. this is something I'm dealing with. This is part of my story. These are my hopes. These are my fears. So Fernando Pessoa, he's a Portuguese writer. So he wrote this book over 170 years ago. It's called The Book of Disquiet. Now listen to what he says here. He says that literature is the most agreeable way of ignoring life. Now 170 years ago, he was right. But today in the United States in 2015, he's not right. It's no longer literature. It's social media. It's technology. It's the internet. It's like this virtual, connected cyber world that we live in. This is the most agreeable way of ignoring life. Now, here's what I want to say. Our connections today, our connections, our associations, whatever you want to call them, our connections are broader but shallower than ever before. And God did not create us to live a life of loneliness. So we're going to look at two things. One of them is going to be, there's only two things. I only got two things for you this morning. That's all I got. There's only two things that are going to help your loneliness if this is something you're dealing with. One of them is going to be an authentic, genuine, not superficial connection with a few other people. No more than that, because you don't have that much to give a lot of people. You have that much to give a few people. And then the next is going to be like this connection and community with God himself. And we'll look at that in just a little bit. So what I want to do is, does anyone know about the hedgehog dilemma? Sigmund Freud would have come out with this last century. And this is like fascinating stuff. So a hedgehog, you guys know what a hedgehog is. A hedgehog is like a little version of a porcupine. So hedgehogs are just little guys, and they got these sharp, prickly little spines. So when the weather gets cold, what do the hedgehogs have to do? They have to stay close, don't they? They have to get warm. Now, do you know what the problem with the hedgehog is when they get too close? They poke each other. And it hurts. Have you ever been poked by a porcupine or a hedgehog? I don't think you probably have, but it doesn't feel good. Not that I have, but I've seen it on TV. So when you get poked, you have to go away. You have to go away and heal. But then when you go away and heal, you get cold. So then you have to return. And then you return and you poke each other again. You have to go away. So this hedgehog has got this dilemma. Do I stay warm where I get poked, or do I go away in isolation where I don't get poked? Now, Sigmund Freud, he actually used this as an example of human community and loneliness. What he would say is, we as humans, we're just wired, and he knew this, we're just wired that we have to be together. We need some of those connections. We're not meant to live in isolation. But, you guys know as well as I know, when that happens, we don't get poked by a spine usually. We call it something like conflict. So conflict happens, and then what do? We go away from the system. We're by ourselves. We're lonely. This is not a good place. We need the warmth of community, so we return. We return back to conflict. We get some more conflict. So basically, the hedgehog moves from one point of discomfort to the next. Now, here's what this means for us today. We're like these hedgehogs. And what the hedgehog ends up having to do is be close enough to some other hedgehogs so he doesn't get too cold, but not so far away where he is isolated and safe. But it's almost I was reading one of the journals this week, and this one person came up with this great illustration. She said, that we should just be naked hedgehogs. Just take the spines off and have this deep community with other people. Now, what's going to happen is, basically what we're looking for here is friends. We're looking for friends who are going to accept us both for who we are and who we're not. We're going to look for friends who are going to say I know your history. It doesn't matter. I'm going to love you anyway. I'm going to care about you anyway. Now, friends are going to embrace both the imperfections and the possibilities of each other. So think about that. I'm not talking a bunch of people here. I'm not talking 1,996. I'm not even talking a dozen. You can only do this with 2 or 3 people, and if you got that, you're blessed. These types of friends are going to be better together then both of them could have become separately. A friend is basically going to be able to look at the other friend and say something like, I like myself the best when I'm with you. That's the type of friends that we're looking for here. Now, Jesus, he talks about friendship. In John chapter 15, verse 14, he says, you're my friend if you do what I command. Now, don't read this as something that's dogmatic and rigid and we have to try to earn Jesus' friendship here. That's not what he's talking about. What Jesus is saying is, I've commanded you to do something. Basically love God with everything you got and love people with everything you got. So if you do these things, we have this friendship. Now, Jesus says, he's saying here, friendship is not easy. And he's making no implication otherwise. But he also says, if you can figure out how to pull this off, it's going to be more than worth it. Now, I want us to think about, let's just talk about this. I've told this story a few times, but it's so profound. I was at a county fair one time, and Benjamin and David were riding some of the little rides at the fair, and Amber was, I think, off talking to some people she knew, and I was just sitting there, waiting for the boys to get done with the ride, and this woman had a tattoo on her forearm. It basically took up the whole inside of her left forearm, and it was just 3 words. And I figured, if this woman was going to spend this money and this time and, have this thing on her forearm, she probably wanted people to read it, so I didn't think I was being nosy. But it basically just said, trust is earned. So that's what her tattoo said. Now, right there, I'd never talked to the woman in my life. I didn't bug her. I didn't ask her any questions, but I already knew a bunch about her just by reading those 3 words. I knew that there was one day that somebody really messed her up. I knew that this type of friendship was going to be really tough for her because trust isn't something that's earned. Trust is something that's given. Therefore, we call it trust. But I knew these types of friendships were going to be difficult for her. I knew that loneliness had to be part of her life. And even if she was surrounded by all these people that loved her, I knew that this was something that she was going to deal with. I had a friend that came into me about 18 months or so ago. Hadn't talked to him for a long time. I used to run with him a lot. Just called me up out of the blue one day. I pretty much knew what he was going to be talking about, so he comes in and he shares. And one of the things I told him is I said, your big issue is not your big issue. You know that, right? Your big issue is that you have no one to share this with. You call some random guy that you used to run with once in a while and you haven't talked to in a few years. And you need to find some people that are going through a similar thing that you're going through. People who are going to accept you for who you are. People who are going to listen to your story and care about it. People who are going to invest in you and invest. This is your issue. So I gave him some names of some people, and it's really cool to see this, all working out for this guys. I think one of my biggest joys as a pastor, and I dealt with this, just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean I don't deal with loneliness. I took David and Benjamin, and we went to Drake University where I went to college. We were coming back from Minnesota last year, and I hadn't been on campus for probably a decade or so. I don't go back very often, and I got to the campus, and I didn't have a ton of great memories. I was a good student, I was a runner and all that sort of stuff, but I just looked around, and what came back to my mind was this thing about loneliness. I remember there's a lot of Friday and Saturday night, and people like me, but there's a lot of Friday and Saturday night. I just felt that I didn't fit in. I was just this guy from this little town in northwest Iowa, and all my classmates were from Chicago and Minneapolis and the big cities like that. I just never felt like I fit in. And this has actually shaped then who the Water's Edge is of the church today. One of my biggest joys as a pastor is when I see people come in here that don't know anybody and they meet some of their best friends here and some of their most lifelong friends here. I just love that. Because I know that loneliness is being fought through friendship. That's one of the ways that we do this. And I just want to tell you this right now, here's not how to do it. You just don't go up to some random person and say, hey, just know we just met. My pastor was talking yesterday about friendships and authenticity, and I was wondering if you could be that friend for me, and I really got 6 things that I want to share with you right now. You got about 3 hours. So it's probably not going to work that way, but I do think that you've got some people that you're probably pretty close with right now. You might be sitting next to them, and maybe there's a relationship that you've already had, and you're not, I mean, it's like that sounds of silence. Maybe you're not communicating like you once did, and that can restart. It can, it does, it happens. But don't take this journey alone. Listen, be a friend. Find some friends. Now, the last one is going to be like community with God. So let's just say, like, you got this whole friend thing figured out. Like, I bored you for the last 15 minutes because you're already there. Like, you got 2 or 3 people, and they totally get you. You get them. They add value to your life. You add value to their life. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Well, you know what? Like, it's still not enough. It's not, because we are created to be in a relationship with God. Unless we're in that relationship, unless that relationship means something, unless that relationship is growing, there is always going to be an emptiness in our heart, because there is a place in our heart that can only be filled with the love of God. Listen to David. This is really cool. This is Psalm 137, verse 1. So David here is actually with some other people, okay? He is not lonely. He's not by himself. This isn't the 25th Psalm where he's crying out passionately to God. Like, he is in community here. And listen to what they say. Beside the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. So, like, they got the friendship thing figured out here. But they're sitting at the water's edge weeping because they're longing for Zion. And I wonder how many of us have that place in our heart that just isn't quite filled because we're longing and we're weeping for Zion. We got some pretty good people who are doing a pretty good job, but there's this place in our heart that can only be filled with the love of God. Now, here's where I want to go with this. I talked to this guy this summer. His name's Lee Barrett. Lee was a visiting scholar at this place that I was studying for a couple weeks this summer, and he has written this great big book on the theology and the philosophy of Kierkegaard and Augustine and how they relate to each other. Like, to me, it's one of the most fascinating books I've ever read, and I wanted to go meet this guy, and I met this guy, and I said, I mean, this book is so thick, it's so dense, and it's so rich, and like, you got 2 of the toughest thinkers out there, and like, this guy he's brilliant. And I asked him, how long did it take you to write this book? You know what his answer was? He said, it took me 40 years to write this book. I've had to read, I've had to learn, I've had to ask questions, I've had to write little articles, I've had to reflect, I've had to revisit, I've had to read some more. The guy's in his 60s and said, Craig, this is my life's work on 613 pages. And like, this is the way it is in our relationship with God. Like, it's a journey, it's not a destination. Like, you don't say right now, well, okay, I'm lonely. Craig says that God can fill my loneliness. God, come and fill my loneliness. Great, we'll see you next Sunday. That's not how it works. How this works is this thing called solitude. And what I want to do is encourage each of us to find and create those spaces and those places where we can receive God's grace, where we can hear God's word, where we can experience God's love. So let us pray.